Well, it's been a while, everybody. There's a few updates going around. Ben and I are currently on a Microsoft Teams call trying to figure out how we're going to do post-hunt clarity from about 600 miles apart.
Yeah.
So you're where are you at right now?
I am in Southgate, Kentucky, which is basically in Cincinnati.
Gotcha. So you're a city folk now.
Kinda, yeah.
What's the population in that area? Like you talking like a couple 100,000 people?
Well, the greater Cincinnati area, which I'm a part of, is 2 million. Like
What?
2.2 million. Yeah.
Holy crap, dude. I'd probably have to go in a 90-mile, like probably further than that. Like Minneapolis is about that, maybe more.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah. I don't know what like how big Southgate is, like our suburb. But
yeah.
the good news is like the last suburb's about 20 minutes for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get past that, it's kind of, back into like the rural parts of Kentucky, or starting to get to it, farmland and stuff.
It sounds like you're in horse country from the conversations we've had of you being in the woods just about every day the last 2 weeks. Instead of having, those nice Midwest bean fields and cornfields and hay fields, you're looking at CRP and just shit grass.
Yeah, it's weird. There's not much for crops here. Like looking on Onyx, there's a lot of fields that you would think would be corn or beans or even hay or wheat or whatever, and they're just like not planted. They're like, I don't know if it's overgrown pasture that they've just kind of let turn into like a CRP field now or what, but
yeah.
A lot of the fields that I thought would have a food source in them just don't. And
it's interesting.
Yeah. But so tonight we're going to talk about what? Boots on the ground scouting, kind of what we're doing this time of the year. I think we're both kind of at the tail end of our scouting for the season, at least in the places we live. Obviously, you're going to have some scouting to do when you go to North Dakota and Kansas, but at least for like our home states, we're kind of wrapping up our scouting. So last time we talked a lot about plans leading into the fall, how we're preparing for those. I think we talked a lot about virtual scouting. And then I think you and I both kind of wait till August to really get in the woods, even though we both talked about how like March would be a great time to scout. Neither one of us.
Yeah, really... This year was different for me, and that's where we're kind of like, as a working class individual, I would say that like my turkey season, I do a little bit of scouting, but at the same time, like I'm not really deer hunting where I turkey hunted. And my college, like 5-6 years ago when I was in college, dude, I had all the free time in the world and I spent it not scouting. Then I moved to Missouri and I bet I spent, as much time scouting as I could, and it was great because it paid off. Last year, by this time, I started scouting in Wisconsin early July and then all the way through the end of August. And I mean, I had 60 plus miles on my boots, just on the Onyx tracker of places I walked. This year, I'm probably sitting at like 12, and it's just a little bit more like I have, 2 years under the belt up here. So like I have spots, like I historic sign. I have scouted some new spots this year, but I also, I got a piece of private now that I asked permission on that's like didn't involve as much work, and I'm limiting myself to a couple chunks. Last year, I think my flaw, and I do this all the time, I talk to other guys about it, and I'm known for like I e-scout the shit out of everything, right? So it's like waypoint here, waypoint here. So now I got like 20 different chunks that I'm super excited to check out. So I go check them all out. Well, guess what? Come season, it's like, well, they're all about equal. So I spend, a day or two in this spot, don't see anything, move on to the next. And I think I just almost covered too much ground, if that makes sense. And not like the same piece consistently to actually give it, the old college try, right? Like I sat a spot once or twice and be like, well, it looked good. I didn't see what I wanted to see, on to the next, which helped me eliminate some spots this year. So I'm thankful for it. But this year I went in with a different mindset. Like I'm going to scout three pieces, four pieces, and scout them like religiously. Blew the shit out of these properties. Like I walked not every square inch, but in an 80-acre property, let's just say, for example, like I bet I walked at least, all the way around the perimeter, like sections through it. So my tactic this year was finding runways, finding food sources, and then like trying to actually find bedding. And the way I grew up hunting, my dad would be like, let's find a runway or sit on a destination like a bean field or a hay field or something and wait for the deer to show up. And I've shot some deer doing that. I don't have any big deer, to talk about with those tactics. We're talking 2-3-year-olds, year-and-a-half-year-olds, like stuff like that. But I've never really put in the thought of like, I really want to try and find like specific beds. And I was at the Mobile Hunter Expo in Michigan at the end of July, and I listened to some. They had a bunch of seminars, but the one I really paid attention to was Dan Infalt from the Hunting Beast or Beast Gear. And he was, going on about like just find the bedroom. He's like, blow some spots up in the summertime or in, March or February when we were talking. Find like legit beds and mark them. That's what I've done this year. Like I'm like, okay, here's a good runway. That's the food source. 5 years ago, I'd have been like, all right, I'm sitting on that runway. It doesn't matter where, just wherever I could shoot. And now it's like, I want to further creep in on that runway as close to where I found beds or where I've seen, scrapes and rubs and get further away from the food source, if that makes sense. Just because I feel like instead of seeing deer the last 5 minutes, the last 20 minutes of daylight, you're now giving yourself a chance to, see and or shoot a buck during, legal shooting light.
Yeah. So you're kind of starting to dive into it, but like, what is your, I guess overall, what's your process? But I mean, from the start, like, what are you looking at? You've picked your spots on a map. Mm-hmm. You've got your permission, or you found public that looks good, whatever it might be, and you've e-scouted them. Like from there, you're actually going to the piece. Where do you start when it comes to that?
I mean, I kind of pick out like everything's different when you get there in person, but I go into the spot after e-scouting. Like I definitely want to check this and this. And it seems to always be a case of like, I chose I set these 4 pins just based on the terrain, the topo, what kind of trees it looks like on Onyx. And then once I feel like when I'm on my way to those pieces or those spots, then I'll find sign and it's like, okay, I'll have rabbit trail. And I'll kind of like, meander off from that. And that really helps me figure out the property because I set a goal. I'm going to this spot, which is, I eventually get there, but I end up going all over the place on my way to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that completely makes sense.
And I've also changed my thought process. And I had this conversation with my dad. Like we always like sat in a spot, but we're like, okay, the wind's blowing this way. We want it to blow this way, only assuming deer are going to come from whatever direction. Like I've had a lot of sits growing up where I got blew at by deer. Like it just wasn't a good wind. We never thought about access. I just accessed where I was always told what was easiest. And now like I'm going into these spots. And once I get, to a spot where I'm like, okay, this is a good, like I would consider sitting here, whatever that reason may be. And now I'm backtracking. Like I came in this way, this works with this wind or at this time of the day, but I'm like, maybe I need to find a second route in here, which is weird. I've never thought that way. Like, I feel like I'm almost going too in depth with it, but at the same time, I'm listening to guys that are reputable as far as consistently killing good deer. And I'm like, maybe this could be a factor of why I had so many sits last year where I didn't see deer. My trail camera, like when I wasn't there, there'd be deer. Maybe I bumped them on the way in. Maybe I wasn't thinking about thermals and, I screwed myself in the process. So I'm just trying to be more meticulous about how I do things this year. If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think like, whether it's public or private, like your access is definitely important. Like the problem you're obviously going to run into on public is you can do everything right and somebody else could screw your sit up.
And that's always a factor.
That's the risk you run. But I mean, for me, it's kind of been like I've put a lot of boots on the ground in the last week. I kind of got binded to And I had a similar situation a couple of years ago when I was coming back from school of like, I don't live, I'm moving somewhere new essentially, and I don't live
Yep.
there, and I'm not moving till August. Like I couldn't get out and scout in June or
Yep.
July. I mean, I could have back in Wisconsin, but what good's that going to do me? So I'm kind of trying to cram it in. I don't want to say cram it in because I don't mind scouting this time of the year. Like I'm excited to hunt anyway, so it's kind of fun.
Mhm.
Like it's almost as much fun as the hunting itself. But learning the properties and like seeing the differences of what you see like on the map and you think that property is going to look like, and then you get there, especially when you're in like a different part of the country than what you're used to, is definitely a bit surprising. Like I didn't realize how many dove hunting fields there were, and what a big deal.
Side note on that, Ellie's parents came up a couple weeks ago in July, and Ellie's mom brought her dad's old dove hunting jacket, so Ellie's grandfather, and like it was super sentimental. We didn't sell it regardless, but she came here and was like, it was an old retro dove hunting jacket. She's like, I brought it because I figured, this northern Wisconsin's got a bunch of hunters. It seems like all you guys hunt, so there's got to be somebody that wants a dove hunting jacket. And I looked at her, I'm like, I don't know a soul in this state that dove hunts. Like if somebody told me they dove hunted up here, I'd think they're a whack job.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know if like I've really seen doves around here. Like,
no. I don't know. Is there?
That's what I'm saying. Like, do you know anybody up here that's like, oh yeah, let's go dove hunting?
No.
That's what I'm saying. So it's geographical. Like it's super popular in Texas, Missouri. There was, on the conservation areas, they would have dove plots, which would be most of the time it was sunflower fields. If you had sunflowers, it would be specifically for dove hunting, and they'd let the sunflowers wilt in September, and then like before October, they just mow the sunflower fields to the ground, which was kind of good for deer hunting because deer do like sunflowers. But once those fields are gone, I mean, it works in your favor, if that makes sense, because it eliminates another food source. Like if you have multiple different, there's the cornfield, there's beans, there's hay, there's acorns, there's sunflowers, like you get rid of the sunflowers. Not only are the dove hunters gone, but then you're also eliminating, like you don't go sit on a sunflower field that's cut because the deer aren't going to go out there.
Right. So anyways, I've put since last Monday, I've put 25 miles on, and I'll probably put another 5 to 8 on tomorrow, I would guess. So I'm definitely getting it in, but I like to start just I pick a waypoint on Onyx, generally what looks like it would make the most sense to go into first when you're trying to get to the whole piece in a day. And from there, I get to my spot, and I like to find, like you and I have talked on the phone this week, and I've been trying to figure out the best way to explain it, but I try to find the reason for the deer to be there more than just the sign you see. If that makes sense. So it's like yesterday I ran into a spot where it was like 3 ridges that come together. There's a ridge on top that faces the south, a ridge to the east that faces the west, and a ridge to the west that faces the east. And coming from the bottom, there was a creek crossing, and trails winding up to where it eventually crossed the fence onto private. And it's like, okay, yes, you've got a creek crossing there, and you've got a fence crossing, and there's a runway that goes between it. Obviously, it'd be a good spot to sit, but why are the deer there? And I try to think through that whole process, and it's like, okay, to the west, there's a change in habitat. It goes from open hardwoods to thick. Up top, you've got hills. Down in the bottom, you've got water, and it's trying to put the whole story in your head together. And like you said too, you mark points on Onyx, and eventually you're kind of just walking through the woods and you find a deer trail, and you're like, okay, well, this isn't, I didn't have this spot marked, but let's follow this trail and see where it goes. And so I've definitely been going through some bushwhacking and a lot of that.
I told you it was going to be a fucking jungle, dude.
Yeah.
The further south you go, the nastier it gets.
On day 2, I realized I need a good spider web stick.
Yeah, I saw you carrying that thing so you just sit there and spin it in front of you.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those processes that I think is hard sometimes to look or to put into words,
Yeah.
like how because every time might look a little different, right? Depending on what the habitat of that piece is, what the pressure of
Yep.
that piece is, what the topographical features are. But I think just like finding a point to start and then trying to create that story in your head has definitely helped me. Um, what else can we talk about?
What are you finding for pressure down there? Because you go into you and I talked a little bit about it, like Wisconsin, right? Anything that's public land other than certain state parks, like for the most part, you can hunt, whether it's owned by a county, national forest, even like city land out, in the middle of nowhere. Like there's a good chance you can hunt it. And then we have Southern Wisconsin. There's WMAs, there's MFL pieces, there's VPAs, like the more you think about it, there's a lot of public land in the state of Wisconsin, like a lot.
There's granted, a lot of them are, you might have an MFL chunk that's 40 acres, and then you might have another one that's 80 acres, where these are all like a small WMA here is 350 acres, 320 acres, something like that, whereas there's so many tiny parcels in Wisconsin. But the beauty of that is you have so many options, and everybody else has so many options. So if you can find like the select MFL pieces and stuff, you might have them all to yourself.
You don't tell people that. Come on, that's what I'm doing.
Well, if on the flip side of that, though, if everybody finds that 40-acre piece, you might have 5 guys stuffed into 40 acres.
Yeah, that's a way for me to move away real quick,
Yeah. So, to give the full story, I guess I think there's 82 WMAs in Kentucky, and then you have Daniel Boone National Forest, which is not close to me, and I think Fort Knox is considered it. So I don't think it's considered one of those 82 WMAs, but you can hunt that as well. Also not close to me. So there's 2 WMAs in the neighboring county, and then I think another 2 in the county that neighbors that. Basically, the short version, there's 5. I have 5 pieces that are that are 50 minutes or less. Then, if you're willing to drive like an hour to an hour 15, there's probably like another 6 or 7.
Sure. So it's like you get a long drive compared to me. Like I'm like, okay, 45-minute drive to my furthest spot. That's about as long of a drive as I want to make for like a single sit.
Yeah. Yeah. So now the beauty of that is the 3 that I think I'm going to put the most emphasis on are about 45 to 50 minutes, or between half an hour and 50 minutes. So it's not too bad, but I mean, you start bumping on an hour and 15-minute drive, you're waking up at 4 to drive down there and pack in a mile, and you know what I mean? And
then you think about it, like if you're hunting in September or October, like you get set, and it's 6 a.m, shooting lights 6:30, 7, whatever it may be. It's probably earlier than that. And then you sit, let's say you sit a 4-hour sit, like a super long sit in the morning. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to pack out and drive home? Or are you just going to like go sit in a parking lot for 4 hours and take a nap just to hunt that same evening?
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely been a different experience. As far as pressure goes, it's always hard to tell. I feel like and maybe I'm just not good at like picking up on human sign and how like actively a piece is used. So like yesterday I got to the WMA and I told you like some guy was in working on the dove field, somebody that works for the DNR, and then another guy was out front of the WMA mowing, and some squirrel hunter was walking out of the woods that I saw.
I'm fairly confident that squirrel season doesn't open up yet, but
whatever. I think it does. I joined a Kentucky public land forum on Facebook, and some guys were talking about it in there. So,
well, good. They're going to be smarter to open it up before bow season, get it out of their systems.
Yeah, but I think like from what I have picked up, I think the big WMAs are the ones that are going to get more crowded.
Because they're
more well known.
Yeah.
I think they're more advertised. They're more actively managed. So I don't know. I'm trying to stick to the little bit smaller ones, but I think until the pressure or the season's on, it's going to be hard to know. I mean, I've been
you're just guessing right now based on what you found. So
the piece I was on yesterday, I found four stands and 2 trail cameras, but it's 1,100 acres. So I mean, you got a lot of room.
There's room to work,
and there's some pretty remote parts of it. So that's the nice thing is generally there's like 1 or 2 parking areas, and they're all like on the same side of the piece of property.
Yep.
Like this 1,100 acre piece has 1 area that you can park for hunting access. So if you can get to the remote spots, like they're remote spots,
Sure, without bumping everything on the way in.
Yeah.
I have been thinking about, and this is more down to a scouting tactic. More recently than not, like I grew up, again, remember I was talking about runways and food sources. I hunted more open areas where I could see, whether that was in a field, on a food plot, in the open oak hardwoods or whatever. As of lately, because I'm more thinking about like where deer are concentrated, and it seems to be where people aren't or where they have cover. Like I've been scouting spots that you and I frankly, I don't even want to hunt, or I might not even be able to hunt. Like I'm walking through stuff where I'm bent over and I'm like, there's runways everywhere. And I'm like doing circles in those spots to find somewhere I can hang a stand like 4 to 10 feet off the ground and shoot 20 yards. And I think I'm going to do that more this year. I know that worked in Minnesota. The thicker the area, the more unappealing and not sexy it is to you or me as a hunter, because it's like I'm boxed in, I can't see, like I can hardly shoot. But think about that in a different perspective. I think 95% of hunters are going to think the same way as you. And I remember you and I had some conversations about like, oh, it's too thick. Like, I'm just not going to walk through it. I'm not going to try to hunt it. Like, I don't know. I'm super convinced, especially with like the cameras I've had now out, that my best spot with the biggest deer and most consistent deer is in the thickest pile of shit possible. But it's like I can sit there, granted, like I can't cut limbs, I can't hang a permanent stand, like I have to pack in. But I'm like, I can pick 2 different shooting windows or 3 different shooting windows and shoot deer between 5 and 15 yards. And I think I'm going to try it because I'm like, I know there's nobody else going to go back there. Like I'm not going to have anybody else crawl up next to me because there is no other spot. And I think guys that scout it are going to be like, oh, great, there's good deer sign, but there's nowhere for me to hunt. So they're going to, disregard it, in that mentality. So I've changed my mindset a little bit.
I probably have an inherent flaw when it comes to that. Like, I mean, you just said it. Like I've called you a couple times and you've been like, get in the thick shit. I'm like, oh, I've gone through it, but it's just like, I don't know how I'd hunt it. It's like, I know how I'd hunt it. You just set up on the trail around, a lot of times you can find beds in there or whatever. And there's a trail that leads in and out of there. You set up on the trail, like you said, 10 to 15 yards from it, if you can do that. And you just hunt that one trail. I think the problem for me is I've done that before on like, on some of our private back home and stuff, like, tried to find some of my own really thick spots where I think the deer are going to go. And I've never had much luck with it. And my problem is like, I'll sit there for a sit or two and it's like, I didn't see a deer, so I'm not going back in there. But a lot of times that might not be the consistent cover they're using all the time. And I think if you stick it out, like all it takes is one deer. Like it just has to be the right deer that comes down that trail. And if you stick to it, it's probably going to happen at some, that buck's going to get spooked by something or whatever.
Yep.
And he's going to go for that heavy cover and you're going to be there. It's just, I've never had the persistence to stick with that spot. And I like to be able to see. Like,
well, and I'm not even saying necessarily hunt it. I'm saying like for you, me, and anybody else listening to this, like in August or whenever, like you said, you found one runway going through the thick stuff. Well, how far do you make it? Like my opinion is while you're scouting, like you can afford to make noise, like you're not carrying a stand, like literally blow it up follow the trail, follow a couple trails, like do circles in that, and just blow it up so you can understand how deer are using that thick spot, if it's actually bedding, if it's just like a corridor or, whatever they're going through, because the thicker it is, that's just how deer hunting works. I mean, majority of the time, that's where deer like to bed because they're safe. But if you can go in there and you blow it up, you may be able to find a spot where you can shoot 3 or 4 different runways. And that's what I found. The spot I'm talking about is like, I walked a couple 100-yard loops and I'm like, there's nowhere. Like, I looked on the map, I can't find an opening. I'm sitting there just bushwhacking, and I got to a spot and I'm like, there's one good lane that's 15 yards. And then there's a tree where it's like, you're talking small gaps, but I'm like, I could shoot 6 different runways and there's deer using all of them. So I'm like, I think as far as like a high percentage sit, as far as deer walking by me, I haven't found a spot with more runways within a tree than that, because you get out into the open woods, and you had said something like this while you were scouting, like there's always one good trail up here and then maybe another 80 yards or whatever, there's another trail. Like, that's 2 options, right? If the deer, theoretically are running the runways, versus the tighter you get. I mean, if you get more runways like that, I'm like, sounds like you're just increasing your percentages.
The other thing that I've found is, like, a lot of times when you're going into a thick spot like that, where it's like, okay, how would I hunt this? This is from what I've seen in the last week.
Well,
like you're getting a bunch of trails that converge down to one like major deer trail to go through this thick shit.
Yep.
And I've found this in a couple spots where, like, if you can find the edge of that thick shit, like the spot I sent you yesterday, where it was like there's a bottom, down at the bottom, there's like an old drainage or old creek bed. Coming up, there's some trails that just kind of meander up the hill, and then I started to find the spot where it converges down to one heavy deer trail going in and out of the thick shit. Like, if you want to set up in their bedroom, but like still be able to see, like, hunt that edge. You know what I mean? You'll be able, like, in that spot, and granted, this is kind of the perfect example, but like I could see clear down into the bottom, but I was right on top of the heavy shit. And so, like, I had a lot of shooting, a lot of visibility, but like I was right next to their bedroom. I wasn't in it necessarily, but I was right next to it.
Well, that sounds like a good evening set, and I've been paying attention to more people in hill country. Like, I feel like I've always done it backwards. Like, in the morning, as soon as the sun hits, thermals rise, so I sit on top or whatever, or sometimes I've sat on the bottom, blah, blah, blah. And then in the morning, vice versa, sit on top or sit on the bottom. Like, in an evening spot, when deer move, especially bucks, I was talking, how they like to bet on those points and stuff like that. Majority of the time, wind over the back, they want to look down. If they're in the thick stuff and they can't see down super far, when you sit closer to the bottom of that ravine and it hits that like last 45 minutes of shooting light, and your thermals switch, right? Instead of going up, they're now going down. As soon as those thermals start going down, if a buck's bedded, that's typically when they get up and move, because they can no longer, catch the scent from below them. Even if the wind's at their back from the top, like, they're still able to catch thermals going up. As soon as those thermals start dropping, the bucks will drop down with the thermals so they can be below everything. So that's kind of a good tactic, especially with the spot you were talking about. I mean, I would entertain that as an evening sit and maybe stay a little bit, down from where that is. If you can give yourself a 30, 40-yard shot to that edge, that way, you can walk in through the creek bed, hide yourself. If bucks are up top, maybe you can stay below some terrain, and then just kind of walk up a little bit as far as you can get while being quiet on that trail, and, give her a go.
Yeah. Well, and think about it. Like, I guess the way my brain thinks about it, so like last 45 minutes of light, right? Like, that's when your thermal is going to start to drop. So if that buck's probably going to get out of his bed, somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour before dark. By the time he's coming past you, it's probably going to be, 15 minutes to last light to 40 minutes to last light. Well, at that point, he's coming from the top, and the thermals are dropping. You know what I mean? So he's never going to get downwind. You're going to be able to shoot him before he has the opportunity to get to where he can smell you.
Correct.
So, yeah, I think in that standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. So you're more along the lines. One of the questions I was going to bring up is this time of the year. Like, I think most people, even your very average hunter, Like June, July, they have no problem going in and like blowing it up because they know they
Yeah.
have enough time on their side before season. But like
Yeah.
this time of the year, the 1st of August to now, the 20th or the
Mhm.
21st, even out to the 25th. Your theory on that is still go in and blow it up.
Yeah. If you're gonna do it, do it once.
Yeah, I agree.
Do it once, just because my tactic even in season now is like, if I go, like when I go to Kansas, I may pick, one morning I get there, like we'll obviously glass and try to find deer. But if I'm like hitting a lump and I'm like, okay, this is a big chunk of woods, Dad and I are going in, we're going to carry the bow, probably not going to carry a stand, and go blow up the entire property. Learn as much as I can about it. One, you're finding the freshest sign because it was made within the last couple days or the same day, and then blow it up, get all the information I need, and then literally go sit somewhere else, as like a blind or observation sit, or maybe somewhere I've sat before. But the next day, I'm going right back in there because I've scouted it. I know where I'm going. I know where I need to be. I seriously don't think it messes up that bad. Like if you're consistently going through it, or maybe you and there's give or take to that, right? If you go blow it up and then, 5 other guys the next week go blow it up, yeah, that spot's probably, gonna be weird for a little bit. But I call it hunter paranoia, where guys suffer from that. They're like, oh, you walk through the bedding. I won't be hunting that for, 2 weeks because it needs to settle down. Dude, I have killed deer that, I feel like I've either spooked the same day or the day before, or other people have spooked. Like I have too many scenarios where I've been successful doing that. So I blow it up, dude. Just blow it up. I don't hunt it the same day, but yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. And there's
Yeah.
gonna be some things changing too, right? So like, if no matter how much scouting you're doing right now, bucks are bachelored up. The next 2 weeks, these bucks are going to be shaving velvet, and they're going to start splitting up, and they're still not going to be in the same spot you were looking, this week. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, and my theory on it is maybe a little different. Like looking at this time of the year, like I wholeheartedly agree with you, just maybe more so for a different type reason.
Sure.
Like I've never had much luck from opening weekend until, the 10th, 11th, 12th of October, like somewhere in there. I had probably my closest encounter with a nice buck this year, in September, and still didn't kill. I've never killed deer in September. And so for me, it's like I'd rather go in and blow it up and get the information that's going to help me all season long.
Yep.
And like, yeah, say your scent stays in there for like 2 weeks and the deer are weary of that for maybe 20 days. Like, even if you go in now, okay, you've got it screwed up till the 10th of September. Like, by then, you've got the rest of the season still to hunt it, and you've got the information on your side now.
Yeah.
Whereas like I've definitely been in the situation where it's like October 30th and I want to go to this spot, but I don't know that much about it because I was scared to go in and like blow it up at the end of August. And so I just avoid it because I don't really know what I'm hunting. I'd way rather have the information.
My opinion on that is a little bit different. If you have a piece, like if you have your own private property and you're the only one on there, be cautious about it. But
Yeah.
that mindset when you're hunting public, I wouldn't like. And I'm like not critiquing, I guess. I'm just like, if you're worried about on public, like, okay, my scent was in there, let's say your scent sits on the ground for 2 weeks and you're not going to go touch it for 2 weeks. That's not stopping other people. And you got to like be weary that there's probably a half dozen guys doing what you're doing all over the property. So I don't think there's a way for those deer to really get away from scent. Like they're maybe narrowing or, shortening up their core areas a little bit where there's less of that scent. But I seriously think, especially when you get dove hunters and squirrel hunters, like there's no way for those animals to get away from it. So just don't think that deep about it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think more so now, like I'm talking from like you said, a public land standpoint, as we're both kind of transitioning to being kind of public land guys now. What are you trying to avoid? Like, either what are you trying to avoid doing when you're going to do this, or when you're looking at spots, is there anything you're trying to avoid?
as of lately now, the more open it is, the less I want to hunt it, unless I have the piece to myself and like it's an open oaks and I'm going to see deer, like that's fine. But most of these guys, the people that hunt up here still are like, man, I want to sit on a ridge. I want to be able to see 100 yards. Like the more open it is, the better chance I have at seeing somebody. So that's literally like the only thing I've been avoiding. Otherwise, I don't think I'd say I'm really avoiding everything or anything. I've been paying more attention to trying to find scrapes in the summertime. Never done that before. Last year I started doing mock scrapes and it worked, right? So if you can't use mineral, you can't use attractant, you can't use bait to get trail cameras up, you're either one doing what you're doing where, you would have to just set something up on a trail, which you're up to chance at that point. Like, okay, my woodsmanship says there's a runway, I should get some deer, blah, blah, blah. I shot a buck last year, September, I think it was on Memorial Day, or maybe it was the Sunday before, I don't remember what it was, early September, over, like, there was 3 scrapes fresh, and those bucks were using them, and I'm like, that's weird, I didn't think bucks actually use scrapes until October, and now that I've been paying attention to it, like, the spot I was talking about in the stick stuff, where I have the most action, like, there's a scrape 80 yards from where I put my camera, that's the size of a car hood, and it's not getting hit every day, but it's like once a week, like the 2 weeks I've checked it, there's leaves kicked off of it. I can see like hoof prints. I'm like, I think that there's scrapes that exist year round. And if you can find them, like get close to them, especially early season. Cause I'm like, if you find a scrape early season, like it's almost, a no brainer.
Yeah. It's from what I've studied on them, like it's a deer's way of doing what you're doing with trail cameras, essentially. Like,
yeah.
They're getting an inventory of deer come up to it. They leave their scent on that licking branch or whatever. Other deer come up and they'll smell it. And, there you go. So for me, I mean, the biggest thing that I'm trying to avoid right now is pressure.
Sure.
Like I said, like, I don't know what it is with some of these people, man, that are getting these stands out here, but like, I was telling you that story yesterday. I mean, I am bushwhacking through the thickest shit. I'm bent over, I'm using my stick to push raspberry brush out of the way. And I'm just, I mean, and it's one of those spots where you're like, how am I going to get, like, I got in here. How the hell am I going to get out of here? And all of a sudden I look like 10 yards to my right. And some dude's got and not to mention it's like a mile back in the woods, like a mile from the parking area. And there's no ATVs allowed on this piece. There's no side-by-sides. They don't allow quiet cats. They consider that a motorized vehicle.
Yeah.
And I look to my right. Some dude's got like a 20-foot tall ladder stand in a tree. Like, how did you get that out here? Like
some people. That's why we bought nested systems that we can pack in. Nobody knows you're there unless they see you in the tree, and I like it that way.
Yeah. So that's really what I'm trying to avoid right now, and like, well, also like the obvious spots, that might not have a stand in them now, but come October 15th, somebody might be set up there.
Yeah, that happens.
But
yeah, let's talk a little bit about shooting and confidence, right? So we had some podcasts last October where you were talking about how you went into the season with the most confidence you've ever had with your setup, shooting all the time, shooting really good, and I had that last year as well, and I killed every deer I shot at. I'm scrambling, I feel like right now. I'm leaving next Thursday, the 29th, to go hunt North Dakota. Season opens the 30th at noon. And I didn't change my string. I feel I got some more arrows, not new arrows. They're new, but they're the same weight, same everything I've been shooting. Fletched them ourselves, filmed everything. I had arrows spinning left. I had arrows not spinning. I had arrows slowly spinning to the right. Like, it was close, but when I put on my fixed heads, like, dude, all over the place. I'm like, shit, got a problem. Re-fletched them, just got them back this week. I've shot yesterday and today. I shot tonight, and like, still, my confidence is still fairly low. Like, my groupings at 30 were not great. Like, I had like the consistency of them were good, but I was like shooting high and right tonight. Like, if I was aiming at a dot here, I'm like 4 or 5 inches high into the right, but it was consistent. Like, I had arrows that were within a baseball, but I'm like, there's no way it's like my bow shouldn't be out of sight, but I'm like, now I'm going through the motions of, am I torquing my wrist? Is it me punching the trigger? Is it like so many other factors? As I shot tonight, like it started getting better. And I was just focusing on that release, like trying to slowly shoot it. So I think it's still a me problem. The hard part about that is like I'm so close to this trip, and I feel like I should have been doing this in July, and I didn't quite make the effort to it. Just I had so much stuff going on, which isn't really an excuse, but so I'm scrambling going into this trip, and my confidence isn't super high. Like if you were to ask me right now what I'm comfortable shooting a deer at, like for mule deer hunting, like dude, I really don't want to, shoot one over 50 yards. Like I shot at 60 and it was not terrible, but I'm like, I need to do some more shooting the next week and a half to really get comfortable,
Yeah.
And there'll be some guys listening to the podcast like, oh, you want to shoot over 30 yards? Well, don't go out west, because if you try to, I mean, you'd have to be a god to shoot mule deer at 20 yards. You can do it, but for the most part, most guys that hunt out there, they're shooting between 30 and 60 yards at deer, and I'm confident at 30, 40 is fine, but it's like anything after that, I'm like, I got to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that I can tell you, not that I'm an expert, but like in what I learned last year, and I think we've found it, or we've talked about it on here, obviously, right? But like once you get your bow set up to where you're confident, like then it's on you. You know what I mean? And it's about finding a way that you can practice where you're not even trying to just like, one of the ways that I started to look at it is I was always just trying to like hone my skills for the year, like knock the rust off, and then keep the rust off. Last year, I tried to actually like get better at shooting. I tried to actually improve my shooting rather than just not be rusty, and so like I told you last night, I think the best way to get ready for a trip like that is like, shoot a bunch of arrows at 90 yards, get to where you're like, okay, my group is the size of, a big pan at 90 yards, or, it's a foot in diameter or whatever, and then go shoot at 100, go shoot at 110, just a few arrows. You don't have to stand in pound 30, but go shoot, a 3 arrow group at 100 yards or 110. And then when you step into 60, like that's going to feel like what 40 yards feels like now, And so I think just like being deliberate about going and just shooting and like setting your number of arrows. The other thing that I found is like, I'll start trying to scramble. I'll be like, shit, I'm shooting like shit today. And, I was going to come to the range and shoot 15 arrows, and I end up shooting 70.
That's what I did today.
Go to the range, be like, okay, I've got, what do you have, 9 days before you leave?
Yeah.
Or for anybody else that like hasn't shot much leading into season now and wants to hunt opening weekend or whatever, like be consistent, create a plan, be like, okay, I'm going to go and I need to shoot 25 arrows a night for the next 8 nights. I'll be ready to leave, and just do that, and just try to put the best rep behind each one that you can. It's no different than if you were going to go shoot 100 free throws and you're just going to mindlessly do it. You'd be way better off shooting 25 free throws that you're actually like focused on. You know, so just shorter practice with better focus always ends up better than longer practice with half-assed focus. Trying to think of what else I can tell you. Not, like I said, not that I'm an expert on it, but the improvement in what I found last year in my ability, but also the confidence that gave me was like crazy,
Yeah, and I know I can shoot. Like I know I can execute stuff. I think I just got to calm down about it. Like, yes, I have a week, which is like some guys are like, oh my God, I got a week. But I'm like, I got a week. I can shoot just about every night, and if I get to Wednesday next week and I'm like, okay, I'm not comfortable at 60, Well, guess what? I know that for the trip. Like, then my goal is, let's get them within 50. And ideally, that's what I want anyways. Like, I want my shots to try to be between 30 and 50, and on a rare case, if it's like a make or break, like, yeah, I'll probably take a 60-yard shot if I feel comfortable with the conditions and like how the animal's acting. Like, that's all stuff you as a hunter have to decide. Like, that like I can execute the shot. Like, if you're pulling back, you need to know that you can do it. Like, if you pull back, you know that you can do it, just let down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you could go out there with the mindset that you're going to shoot out to 60 yards on an animal, and you could get there and you could have 25 to 30 mile an hour winds every day and just go, okay, this isn't realistic, So it's no different than if you just decide, okay, like I'm not confident past 50. Well, then you just need to get 10 yards closer,
I'm actually excited for the weather. I was looking at it this week up here and over in North Dakota where I'm going. Like, from Friday this week through Tuesday next week, it's going to be like, at least here, it's going to be upper 80s, low 90s. Over there, dude, it's going to be like 95, 98. But like that Wednesday through like the rest of the trip I'm there, it drops down to the low 70s all week. Like, it's going to be good. Like, it's going to be like low 50s in the morning and then like high of like 75, 73. Like, there was one day I think it was close to 80. It was like 77 or something. But I'm like, it's a significant cold front consistent throughout the week. So I'm really hoping that helps. And I'm not a huge cold front believer as far as like, oh, it's like make or break to get the deer to move. Because out west, the deer move regardless. It's just timing, right? Like, now I'm looking at deer that are getting out of their beds 2 hours before shooting light versus like the last 45 minutes, which gives me more time to make a stalk, more time to, glass them, more time to look, and it's just more enjoyable being out there because there's no shade,
Yeah. No, that'd be nice. But, well, the biggest point that I wanted to make on this episode was like, we're talking specifically about scouting public land. And like, I think for anybody, and what I always did, not that I was much of a public land hunter before this year, but like, I always tried to pick a piece or two pieces to go out and scout every summer of public, even though I had private access. And then just like, it makes you a better hunter. You know what I mean? And like, even if you don't go in there and hunt, like, you can go in and scout it. You've got a piece in your back pocket now, and you can blow it up. And like, you learn a ton. And like, I feel like that makes you a better, more well-rounded hunter. So,
moral of this episode, guys, go blow it up.
Get out there. Yeah.
So I think we're going to probably wrap up this episode. The next episode you guys are going to hear next week, Ben and I are going to talk about the Spoon and Crockpot Club and how dumb fuckers try to score their deer.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that subject gets me just riled. The fact that, like, there's people that know how to score deer, and then there's absolutely people that show me a picture. They're like, oh, dude, look at this 160 I got on camera. I'm like, dude, that thing's got milk on its lips. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. So appreciate you guys for following along. We'll see you next week.